everyone. Hey folks, we're going to get started in just a minute. Chris is going to get my microphone ready. Everything we're looking good. Okay, great. Thank you so much everyone for joining us for the fourth Planning Academy session of this round of Planning Academy. We are going to be talking about the comprehensive plan and equitable engagement and environmental justice in this session. First, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Carl Kolosna, and I'm a senior planner with the Durham City County Planning Department. And I've also got Sarah Long here and Lisa Miller. And I think, do we want to go around and just staff raise your hand maybe and just say hi for just a second? Nope, maybe not. Here's staff. Y'all have probably seen some of them through the last little while. Great. So I think, as before, we've got simultaneous interpretation of the session. But yeah, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thanks again for everybody for joining us today. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about the comprehensive plan. And when we've just came off this project that we've been working on for the last 4 years, and when I say comprehensive plan, I think the name is a little misleading, honestly. It says it's called a comprehensive plan, so it does everything, right? And it fixes all the issues, and it figures out exactly how we're going to do everything perfectly in the future. And that is certainly its intent. But I think what we found the more we worked on the project is actually it was helpful to talk about what the plan is not before we talk about what it is. So that's what's up on the slide here, and I think these are a couple of the key things that we really ran into when we were talking to folks. So the first one is that the comprehensive plan is not the city or the county's budget, and that in a lot of ways is kind of confusing, because to be able to do things, it's going to take money to do that, right? And the city and the county is spending money, but there's an entire process that the city and county have that's on an annual review that is how the budget gets created and approved. Now, this plan can absolutely influence and talk about what should be in the budget, but you can't have a sentence in the plan that says, you know, $100,000 should go to this or something should go to that. So I think that's one key thing. The second one is it's not the development regulations. It's not the Unified Development Ordinance. So y'all have heard probably a lot, maybe more than you wanted to, about the Unified Development Ordinance. It's the zoning ordinance. It's the legal law about what is allowed to be built and how it's built. So if we're talking about a comprehensive land use plan that's talking about what can be built and where, again, it seems a little strange. Shouldn't this plan be setting out the regulations? And it does. A really important part of the plan is making sure that it's describing and talking about how the regulations should be changed. But again, like the budget, in the plan itself, it can't say, here's what the rules are, or developers have to do this. It can make advisory statements. And then the last thing is probably more obvious one. It's not a crystal ball, and in that I mean it is a document that is created at a place and time, and it needs to be flexible enough to be able to change to deal with things that were unpredictable as it was created. I think you know, say the coronavirus pandemic, for example, it would be very difficult if you're creating a comprehensive plan in the years before that to predict that in the future, but you do want a plan that is flexible and can account for different situations so that if and when something does happen, you can deal with it. So I think that's probably enough about what the plan is not. So here's what we kind of identified as the couple of key things that the plan really is and what it does. So the first one, and probably one of its primary uses, is it's a guidance document, and it's used to make decisions, and it's used to inform and to guide decision makers. So in one really specific case, that's city council. When somebody is asking to change the zoning regulations, what they're allowed to do with their property, property, that request has to go to City Council, and City Council will vote either to approve that change or to not approve that change. So this document describes what we want to see and what we don't want to see, and it's used to inform those sort of decisions by City Council. So specifically in the rezoning process, that's one very specific way that the comprehensive plan is used. The second is that, and the rest of these are sort of connected to each other, is that it's a blueprint and a guide for what the planning department should be working on, and also what other departments or organizations should be working on. So it has actions that describe projects or initiatives or small area plans or special things that need to be worked on even after the plan itself is adopted. And then it also works with Durham Public Schools and water management and other groups that are very involved in how development works and how it happens. And then this is the last point, and I think this is a really important one. It is a commitment from local government about what is important, and it is really a reflection of the place and the time that it was created, and it's a reflection of who is involved in its creation, and it's a reflection of who is not involved in its creation. So going to the next slide, Chris, if you could. So this is a quote. I'm just going to read it out first. It says, "Urban renewal is a program gaining almost universal acceptance in the country as a method of preventing, arresting, and eliminating blight." Does anybody have a guess where maybe this sentence or quote came from? Okay, so Chris, if you go to the next slide. This is a quote from the comprehensive plan that the city of Durham adopted back around 1960. And I don't think there's any planner in this room, or probably any member of the audience, who doesn't read this statement and has questions or concerns or outright disagrees with it. And I think what's really important, my point here is, again, that a comprehensive plan is a statement of values. And it's a statement of values in the time and the place that it was created. So I'm going to go over here. I've got a copy of the portion of the 1960 plan here, and this will be, if anybody wants to take a look at it at the break. I'll just read one other quote from it. So it says, "It's recommended that the city consider its entire area in regards to urban renewal. Blight is widespread, and there are very few areas of the city it does not touch. Residential blight is spread throughout the city and is predominant in the Hayti and Edgemont neighborhoods." So you can come look at this plan, and it says at the start who was involved in its creation. The planning department was 3 or 4 people at the time when this was created, and you can see who was on city council and who the mayor was. All of the people that were involved in this decided that this was a reflection of the statement that at least they personally thought was what Durham should be doing. So I really just bring up this example because as we embarked on this comprehensive plan, it was really important to think about, again, what was our intent, what outcomes were we looking for, who was involved and who was not involved. So I'm going to hand it off to Lisa Miller, who's going to talk about the engagement process for the new comprehensive plan that we created, and she's going to go into the details from there.
Thank you, Carl. I'm left-handed, so I'm going over here. I don't know if that's a real thing, but it feels more comfortable. You all heard back in your first session, Robin talked a little bit about kind of an introduction to the comprehensive plan that we've just been doing. We spent about 5 years working on it, so I'm not going to talk about this in great detail, but just wanted to give some highlights around the engagement that we've been doing on that work, and kind of how that leads us forward. And really, we wanted to start with the comprehensive plan that we just created was our department's first real foray into trying to do equitable engagement. So we wanted to share this video, which we created at the beginning of the process and shared in 5 workshops that were held around the community to really kick off the project. So we'll start with this.
Have you experienced changes in Durham that negatively affect your everyday life? Many in the community have. The City and County of Durham want to correct those issues and ensure the future changes work for the entire community. They're listening and want to hear your ideas for making Durham a place where everyone thrives. That's why the City and County of Durham are inviting all members of the Durham community to take part in the creation of the new comprehensive plan, which will determine the vision for growing Durham over the next 30 years. This collaboration between the City and County of Durham and the Durham community is the result of the new Engage Durham initiative, which seeks to ensure that all community stakeholders are involved in the shaping of city and county projects. Help build a Durham that works for everyone.
So this was our first real public statement around equity and trying to shift the way that we do our work to focus on equity. And that started with looking at equitable engagement. The way that we began was really trying to take our traditional public meeting structure that we use and doing everything that we could to remove barriers to participating. So providing locations throughout the community on different days, times of day, weekdays, weekends, providing childcare, making sure there was easy bus access, providing Spanish interpretation, providing food. And as we did that, we asked people to fill out a demographic questionnaire. This isn't a practice we'd had in the past, but so we, for the first time, had data around who we were reaching. And what we saw is what we anticipated, but we wanted to have the data to kind of justify where we put our resources, is that despite removing all these barriers to access for this type of meeting, we still heard from predominantly people who have higher incomes than what's average for our community, higher levels of formal education, so many people with PhDs, as well as many more white folks than are representative of our community. We did have a slightly more representative group of people show up by taking all of these actions, but essentially what we were able to do with this demographic information is to then justify we need to put resources and effort into reaching the people who are not represented here. So that really kicked off our work with this project. So I'm going to jump into, you can go back one slide. Thank you. So before we get too far, we wanted to kind of share a definition of equitable engagement. There are probably lots of these, but really just to take a quick step back, we started this effort around equitable engagement for this project because at the time, the community's equitable community engagement blueprint was being drafted. That is something that was really pushed for by community members, including Angel over here, was instrumental in its creation, and really lobbying and fighting, advocating for community, our full community, to have a voice in, and it came up in particular in relation to the Durham Beltline Trail, what's now called the Durham Rail Trail. So as we're hearing about this blueprint being created and we're starting this plan that's looking 20 or 30 years into the future, it covers the entire county, it felt like a huge opportunity to say we're going to prioritize equity in this and to do what we could to follow the principles in that blueprint. So with that, I want to share, so this definition is one that will be in the revised community engagement blueprint that's being worked on right now by staff in the Neighborhood Improvement Services Department. So this definition says the process of encouraging project or program involvement with community members that prioritizes, highlights, and amplifies the voices of the underrepresented and disproportionately impacted, equips and resources their efforts, and supports their capacity to advocate for themselves in decision-making processes to ensure the participation, contribution, and safety of all those impacted through the utilization of city resources. That is a definition. There's a lot packed in there. There's a lot, I think that's part of the reason it took a while for the city to come up with a definition that they were comfortable with. But one thing I want to note here is that when we talk about equitable engagement, we are explicitly not talking about equal treatment or sameness. We are acknowledging and recognizing there's disparate history, there's inequity, and therefore we need to put more resources, more time into reaching people, listening to, and elevating those voices in the work that we do. So that's our addition to that kind of what that means for us. And as I mentioned, the blueprint is being revised now, and I think is going to be released in its revised form in the next couple of months. Next slide. So I want to talk just about a couple of the strategies that we used to try and make our engagement more equitable. Some of these feel like no-brainers, and I completely understand that. However, there are things that were not the norm in the work we were doing. So one of those things is, we have a significant percentage of our population that are Spanish speakers. So making sure that all of the materials that we created were available in Spanish. We had a full second website with Spanish information page for page that matched content, providing interpretation during sessions, providing focus group conversations where those were facilitated and held in Spanish with interpretation provided in English for staff to participate, really just trying to find ways to remove barriers. And we are really excited to have our entire comprehensive plan in Spanish as well as in English, which is not something we've done before. We also really focused on digital accessibility from an Americans with Disabilities Act perspective for our blind and low vision residents in particular, making sure as we shifted to dealing with COVID times, everything was digital, really making sure that we were meeting best practices around how to make that accessible for folks using a screen reader, for instance. And another piece, again, that feels like kind of a no-brainer is just continual communication with folks about what's happening. Even if there's not anything exciting to report, providing information about what we're up to, what's happening, what to expect next, so that people are continually having an idea of what's going on and not wondering, has this project taken a turn because we're not being informed of what's happening? Next slide. In addition, some of the barriers that I mentioned, trying to remove for in-person gatherings, transportation-related, food, childcare, interpretation, kind of making that a norm across the work that we did when we were meeting in person. We did also find, after some initial concerns during COVID, that virtual meetings, virtual conversations, and focus groups were actually really accessible to some folks in our community. People with families, people, depending on what their work schedule was, it was easier for them to hop on a Zoom call and be multitasking with whatever else was happening. So we kind of thought that would maybe slant towards people with more privilege, but we did find that there were a lot of folks where that was more accessible. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about some of our strategies to reach residents who haven't been part of our process. And the reason they haven't been part of our process is because we haven't done that work to go and find them and tell them about our work and how it's impacting them. So I mentioned, we collected demographic data as we started off. We began a program which are called engagement ambassadors with this work. This was one of the things that was brainstormed kind of initially out of the blueprint concept. And essentially it was just, we are asking residents to engage their neighbors, family members, friends, on whatever it is we're trying to get input on, and we are going to stipend them to do that. So we are compensating them for their time. They are having conversations with people who are comfortable talking with them, rather than with anyone coming from local government who there's a lot of trust to rebuild and a lot of relationships to build in our connection with folks in the community who have been harmed by local government. So this was hugely helpful. It was a very, a whole host of engagement data that we hadn't heard before. Again, that we maybe had some anecdotal understanding of. But I wanted to say that initial engagement ambassadors program was a heavy lift by myself and Carl and our colleagues in neighborhood improvement services. We realized a lot of the barriers there for us as staff taking on that program. And so after that point, we contracted with a community member, Ideal Ortiz, who's really run with that and helped pull people, pull different projects and people into that work over the last several years, and it continues. We did also, one other thing I'll mention is that sort of engagement and sort of content creation was the policy working groups. Again, I think Robin maybe mentioned this with the introduction to the comprehensive plan in session 1. But we brought together groups of staff and residents to really co-create the draft policies for the comprehensive plan that then got brought out to the community for input. So really bringing that combination of resident expertise and staff expertise into conversation together in order to create that work. So with that, I'm going to jump into just a couple of examples of how equitable engagement shows up in our comprehensive plan. So we were able to undertake all of these efforts for this big project. There was a lot of focus on it. It's important, so we're committed to this. But we knew from what we hear from residents and from what we learned in the process and our commitment as staff that we need to continue and to expand this work. So in our comprehensive plan, under the community relationships topic is where we talk about what we want to do towards equitable engagement moving forward. So this is really going to shape our work as we are now done with the comprehensive plan and are looking at what are other ways that our department can interact with the community in a more equitable fashion, and how do we work towards more equitable outcomes through that. So I'm going to share these topics listed here, just kind of the big picture umbrellas that those policies fall under. But if you want to jump to the next slide, I'm just going to talk about a couple of examples. So this first policy 6 in the comp plan, just prioritizing equitable engagement and then basically listing all of the ways that we do work in the planning department, right? So one of our policies is that we're expanding this effort around equitable engagement across the various things that we're responsible for. Next slide. And kind of underneath that, really continuing a focus on removing barriers to participation, helping make it easy for residents to be involved in decision making, right? This isn't just we want to create a space for people to like tell us what they think, but really creating space for residents to have decision making power, but focusing on those who've been excluded and negatively impacted by our past decisions. And again, providing ways to overcome some of those barriers. And so these policies that are in the comprehensive plan lead to actions or ways that we can start to implement those things. So one of those is developing partnerships with local organizations, folks in the community that are already doing this work, bringing our work together so that we can be more effective in how we do that rather than the city trying to recreate the wheel, because we know that this work has been happening in community all along. And the next action, actually the next two, are basically just using the blueprint to work on the process that we have for changing our unified development ordinance, and then for how we handle zoning map changes and annexations, which are on the next slide. So really focusing on how we can make changes to those really important processes so that residents can have more of an impact on that and on those decisions. So these are all going to be guiding the work that we do as a department trying to expand equitable engagement efforts into the future. So one of the things that I want to mention, we are the planning department. Our expertise in large part is around planning and land use. We don't feel like we are engagement experts. So one of the things that's been really important in our work is to build relationships with and learn from people who are experts. And a huge part of that is building relationships with community members and community organizations who have been doing this work and advocating for themselves and their communities. Another piece of this work is partnering with other like-minded groups in the city who are also trying to do this work for city residents and with city residents. So I just want to highlight two briefly. As we got started with the comprehensive plan, the Office on Youth, which is a joint city-county department, was beginning what's called the Youth Listening Project. It was a similarly comprehensive effort, really great work removing barriers and bringing young people together to talk about what was important to them and what they wanted to see in their community. The timing of this was amazing because we were able to pull a lot of the engagement data from this effort and basically just reinforce it through the comprehensive plan. So finding the ways that young people in our community talked about housing and transportation and safety, and weaving all of that into the policies and the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. And in addition, the Office on Youth has been a great partner in helping us bring young people into the work that we're doing. A big part of how they're able to do that is with their Changed by Youth Ambassadors program, where they are providing stipends to young people and trying to bring them, embed them into our departments and the work that they're doing. And as part of that, they did some excellent job helping us bring young people into our policy working groups and helping us kind of create that understanding of how young people and adults can exist in space together in ways that are really creating accessible space and opportunities to fully participate for young people. So the other partner that I want to mention is Neighborhood Improvement Services, and specifically their community engagement team. I know I've mentioned them a few times. They have been really supportive and collaborative with us throughout this effort and helping us think about how we tackle these different things. So I want to share that kind of fully throughout the comprehensive plan development. But also just wanted to share a brief plug for a tool that they are going to be publicizing next week. It is called Be Heard Durham. Be Heard Durham. Need to enunciate. It is an online portal where engagement data, people's perspectives, people's stories are shared with their permission. These are the results of around 30 small conversations that were recorded and then transcribed and reviewed, analyzed, tagged for different topics that come up. So this is a really transparent way of seeing what kinds of things residents are saying. I think it's really valuable because it prioritizes the qualitative data and people's stories rather than an answer to a survey question. And it's something that's accessible, will be accessible to community members as well as to staff, so that we can be more responsive by having this kind of collection of data that we hope to continue to add to. So that session, that kind of unveiling, is November 15th. It's a Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. And we can share the registration link if y'all are interested, along with the portal link itself. But so we wanted to play just a brief clip that comes from this site that will help us lead into the next part of the presentation.
They can come and fix the street. They have our streets in turbo shape. They haven't paved our street in I don't know when. And what I think, how I feel that after they put 147 and we were blocked, that they just forgot about us. And we were a neighborhood that was just there. Other streets have gotten paved, and we still waiting. The city needs to, they need to pave all the neighborhoods, not just certain neighborhoods.
Right.
And it seems that they're paving just certain neighborhoods and they're leaving other neighborhoods out.
So this is from one of the focus group conversations. You hear a resident talking about the impact and the harm caused to their community by the Durham Freeway, Highway 147, decades later, and how they feel kind of disconnected and cut off from our community, and kind of starts to hint at some of the land use issues that are associated with the creation of this freeway. So back in session 1, y'all heard a little bit about the Durham Freeway, its creation, and some of the destruction and ongoing harm that our community members have experienced and are experiencing from that. It's a big part of our local planning history that we need to reckon with. These images are the ones that were shared in that initial presentation in session 1. On the left, you'll see Hayti before the Durham Freeway construction, and on the right, you'll see it after, and the destruction that it caused, or that resulted from those decisions that we as local government made. So as background kind of for the rest of the evening, we wanted to share a little bit of information on environmental justice and environmental racism kind of connected to the Durham Freeway. So, and really understanding how those concepts relate to planning, so that you can have that in mind as we shift to the second half of the session, where Evian and Angel are going to talk about a current effort around the Durham Freeway. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to talk further.
Thank you, Lisa. So before you look at this, I wanted to ask, is anyone familiar with environmental justice, the term environmental justice? Okay, is someone willing to share what their understanding of environmental justice is? If you're willing, I'll give you the mic. If it's anyone brave enough. Anyone? If you don't want to talk about a definition, you can just talk about something that you think relates to environmental justice, something that you've experienced, that you've heard about or read about. Thank you.
I'll leave. Hello. Okay, I'll leave the definition to somebody else, but I do want to highlight that Warren County, is it county or city?
Warren County.
Warren County is the birthplace of environmental justice, and that North Carolina has a huge role in environmental justice in this community and the movement towards ensuring that folks who are harmed by, historically, who have been harmed by things like the Durham Freeway get the justice that they deserve. Things like, tree coverage, and heat islands, even, ensuring that homes are, able to be able to keep people warm and not seep out different, not seep out the heat and so that they can, have enough. I'm trying to say all the different things, yes. But I'm going to let somebody else talk now.
No, that's great. Thank you. You got to start off talking about Warren County, which is in the 1980s. There were protests because there was a company that was dumping PCBs, very harmful chemical, on the side of the road. And it was impacting people, particularly people who have wells, just people who are living in the area. So actually, there were a lot of community organizers who got together, including youth, and they actually laid out in front of the roads, in front of the trucks, to stop them and prevent them from going to the area where they were dumping the chemicals. So thank you for bringing that up. There's an exhibit right now, I believe it's at Duke, that they have pictures and interviews from people who were involved in that. So that's a great piece of North Carolina history. I think someone in the back.
I was just going to kind of reiterate what you just said. The amazing part about this is that I was having a conversation with someone who grew up in Warren County, and he was telling me this story today. So how apropos.
That's
yeah,
great.
Very similar.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and that's a clear example where we had a large company that they were dumping at a site that was harming people, and in response to that, people organized together and they basically said, we're not going to allow this. This is not something that we're going to allow in our community, and a lot of change happened because of that. So I want to talk about environmental justice a bit in the Durham context, and I just also wanted to bring up, you mentioned some things like the heat island effect or issues, their environmental hazards that people experience disproportionately in their neighborhoods. So, but that's something that comes up when we talk about flooding. We talk about neighborhoods that don't have enough trees, so it's very hot. Like, these are things that impact people's health, and these are things that are related to land use and planning. So I wanted to start with the EPA's environmental justice definition, which is, it's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. This goal will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental health hazards and equal access to decision-making processes to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. So I think that's a pretty good definition. The EPA did a really good job with that. And then I want to bring this into the Durham context. So in the next slide, we have a map here. And this is actually a part of the Bull City 150 project, and I know in the first session we talked a bit about that project, and we got some great historical information from there. So Chris is going to take us to the website where you can see this map a little bit larger. This is a map of Durham, but it's a bit older. This map is actually from 1937. So this is before the highway. So let's see if you can zoom in just a little bit. So in the purple here, we have predominantly or majority black communities in 1937. The green are parks. These little white buildings here are schools. And then we have these little black smokestacks. The small ones are factories, and the large ones with a lot of smoke coming out of that, those are incinerators. So if you can see it. I just want to have you take a moment and kind of look at where these purple areas are and where the factories and incinerators are. And some of these are really the same neighborhood. This one, this is the Hayti area here. So this is the size of the former Hayti neighborhood. Here we have the Bottoms, East End, the Albright community, West End and Lyon Park. Again, here we have an incinerator and there's a school right across from what looks like a creek. And you have the Brookstown neighborhood. So any thoughts when you see this map? Particularly when we talk about in the context of environmental justice. Does anybody have any responses to this? Is this surprising to anyone? It sounds like it's not surprising to a lot of people. So this is a case when we talk about land use, we talk about neighborhoods and residential areas and their proximity to factories and to very polluting uses and industries like incinerators. This is a key land use issue that we're trying to address. And like I said, this happened before the highway. So before the destruction that the highway caused, these were issues that already existed within Durham. So this is important in terms of, for us when we're working on the comprehensive plan, recognizing that history and using that as a lens for how we're going to move forward and how we're going to remediate some of these issues. So in the next slide, as a part of the comprehensive plan, we used certain terms that we wanted to make sure that we had a clear definition on, and one of those terms was environmental racism. So as a team, we defined environmental racism as the institutional rules, regulations, policies, or government and corporate decisions that deliberately target certain communities for local undesirable land uses and lacks enforcement of zoning and environmental laws, resulting in communities being disproportionately exposed to toxic and hazard waste based on race. So I think that map before was a really good example of that environmental racism is a big issue in Durham and has been a big issue in Durham. So keeping that in mind, Working with our policy working groups, hearing from community members, we knew that we had to address the issues of environmental racism and environmental justice in our comprehensive plan. So I just want to share a couple of examples of how we address that in the plan through our policies and actions. So policy number 93 is to remediate the ongoing legacy of environmental racism and the impacts of highways, industrial uses, landfills, incinerators, and other disruptive land uses on human health. So we have the map, looking at those areas, we know there were these places where there were a lot of contamination, there could be negative impacts on health. We want to look at how it's possible to remediate those areas. What can we do to protect the people who are living there, who are working there, like children who are playing there, schools, et cetera. So those are the areas that we definitely want to focus on remediation when it's possible. For action number 50, we have mitigate the impacts of industrial land uses on adjacent communities. Focus these efforts particularly in communities of color and low-income communities. So that's, again, going back to that we know the history of these uses were primarily in Black communities in Durham and in low-income communities. So we want to focus on how we can either get rid of the industrial land uses or that are there, or make sure that if there are future communities that are going to have affordable housing, that they're nowhere near these industrial uses. And then lastly, this sets us up nicely for our talk about the freeway. For policy number 66, we want to support and resource a community-led effort to remediate past harms from the development of the Durham Freeway. This could include reconnecting neighborhoods and restoring or creating desired services, infrastructure, housing, employment, green space, and other amenities, as well as improving bicycle, pedestrian, and transit connections between the north and south side of the Durham Freeway. So what that is essentially getting at is that we want to work with community to figure out how we can improve some of these decisions that caused a significant amount of harm in the past. So, get started with a question here, Chris.
Actually, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, please.
So the first question is, I understand the impact to Durham citizens. How does the federal government factor into the remediation plan?
That is a good question. That is more of a transportation question. I don't know if they're gonna cover that in the next session.
Okay.
But that is a very good question.
All right, and also, has there been, I'm sure there have been, but where can I find some of the study data that determines kind of the impact on the children, particularly developmental impact and educational stagnation for students that may have been exposed to those pollutants? Somebody did them.
Yeah.
Because they can do them now.
Yes. Here, you can just use this one.
So on the question of where to find the data, one of the sources that I've used a lot in the past in my work, just in energy equity specifically, was called the Justice 40 data set. And what it is it maps every single census block in the U.S. with a lot of additional factors that haven't traditionally been mapped, like air quality, educational outcomes, and so on and so forth. So it's really easy to kind of intersect whatever two values that you're looking for. Yep. What was it called? Justice 40. Yep.
So, are the policies and actions available to us on our website?
Yes. So the policies and actions are in the Durham Comprehensive Plan, which you can find on the Engage Durham website.
Okay, so it is available.
Yes, it is available. And so we're opening up for questions for everything that we've said at this point, too. So it's not just the environmental justice section. Any questions? Comprehensive plan, the engagement section, anything?
Sorry, I feel like I'm stealing the mic. But I did want to ask, like, the topic of environmental justice is so very entwined into just all sorts of different sorts of justice. Like, one of the things that what commonly comes up is, like, in terms of affordable housing and rents, when you think about someone's, like, monthly payment, like, it's not just the rent, it's like energy bill, water, and so on and so forth. One of the things that when I was first studying this stuff that really shocked me was that all these initiatives for like solar power in homes, and these initiatives that, like, energy companies have to buy back energy, have the potential to create even more inequity, because the folks that have capital to build all these things no longer have an energy bill, and everyone else is kind of footing the bill. But I didn't really know about this until, like, I started studying it. So, you know, although technology is changing, the environment's changing, like, how nimble is this plan, or how do you keep nimble in order to make adjustments for the unknowns? Yeah.
So let me first mention, we actually have a policy that talks specifically about trying to help people, like, make it easier for people to incorporate those technologies into affordable housing. And obviously there's a tension there with kind of upfront costs and making that affordable, but recognizing that there is that benefit of lower energy bills, as well as healthier air internally, that really people who have lower incomes deserve to have that. So that's a policy that we have. As far as the nimbleness of the plan, one of the things that we have committed to that, you know, in working on this plan, we had one that was from 2005. We know a lot of things had changed, a lot of priorities had shifted in that time. So we have a couple of mechanisms built into the plan and its implementation where we're checking in every 2 years, not just on kind of what conditions are in the community, how things might have shifted, but also using that as an opportunity to check back in with community and to say, okay, here's what we're seeing as far as the impact this plan has had, potentially the outcomes that we're looking at in the last 2 years. What do we need to know from you all about how your priorities may have shifted, how the way that our community is changing might change the way that you feel about different priorities. So trying to check in regularly around that and build in opportunities for some shifts in the plan along the way, as well as not waiting, 20 years to do another one.
I'll add one thing to that quickly. I think I talked at the start about how the plan is not the development regulations and it's not the budget. And in those ways, it can be kind of nimble in that it's because it's not in a lot of cases having to make a hard decision in the moment right now. It's more characterizing. Sometimes it's really just talking about those issues and tensions basically, and saying, and just like uplifting that while we're doing this, you really need to watch out for this unintended consequence or this other way that maybe you didn't think of, and that is sort of how it's used as a guide or almost like a reference for when we're making the decisions, when we're putting the budget together, when we're creating a program or something like that, sort of, what is important and what have we heard from the community. Yeah.
So is there going to be similar resident involvement in the writing of the UDO? I realize it's a legal document, more legal type of document, and it's the nuts and bolts of how the comprehensive plan gets carried out. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's equally important to get residential involvement in that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll hand it over to Lisa in just a second, but there were a lot of people who were involved in the comprehensive plan when once they figured that we weren't talking about the actual regulations, they were like, all right, well, whatever, let me know when you actually get to the real stuff, and which is not to discount the comprehensive plan, but and we know one challenge as opposed to the comprehensive plan with the Unified Development Ordinance is that it's really complicated, it's really technical, and it's also really important because these are the black and white letter of the law regulations where there's really no wiggle room at all, and developers have to follow these regulations. When we're talking about the comprehensive plan, in some ways, it's a lot easier for people to talk about what is their vision for Durham, what is on their mind about Durham, what is their ideal Durham. When we start getting into should the setbacks be 7 feet or should they be 8 feet, it's really difficult. So I'll let Lisa talk about some of the projects that we're getting started with the UDO engagement.
So obviously one of the biggest implementation opportunities for the comprehensive plan is a new unified development ordinance, right? Every development that gets built has to comply with it in one form or another. So as we're getting started with this, one of the things that's really important that we're working with a technical consultant who writes code across the country, who is used to like researching the state legal requirements, working with communities and their priorities to come up with good code solutions. So that consultant is called Code Studio. We're also hiring an engagement consultant who is a local person who's going to be helping us specifically with things like engagement ambassadors and focusing on making the engagement more accessible to residents who haven't been involved in something like this in the past or have been excluded. One of the things that is important is we've been doing all of this work for the last 5 years and hearing from community. We've heard a lot of things that are very relevant to code, right? So the first thing that I did is share all of that data with our technical consultants. So they're wading through that. They're asking us questions to help understand, from the conversations we've been in with community, where do they need to read between the lines when it's not always clear just from the data? What kinds of things are we hearing? Is there anything that we can do to help them understand that context? And essentially, they're starting this work by doing an audit. What is it that you have now? What's your code look like? How's it functioning? And trying to look at what kind of approach they can recommend going forward, given all of this information kind of as a continuation of the comprehensive plan effort. That said, with the actual engagement on the Unified Development Ordinance, because it is another giant document and it is really technical, one of the things that we're focusing on is thinking about what are the impacts. How can we talk about code, what different regulations are, and what those are as impacts to residents, as opposed to like the setback is 10 feet. So really trying to focus on helping folks understand that. We know education is going to be a significant piece of this, like all of our work in planning, because we haven't done a good job of sharing education, understanding information about planning. The other piece is really trying to understand, I think there are certain parts of the ordinance that talk about different things, that impact different things, that are going to be of greater interest to residents in terms of what impact it has on their community and their neighborhood. So really focusing in on those kinds of things with engagement questions, conversations that are focused enough to be able to actually influence the code. Like, we don't want to be asking these big picture questions about what people want in Durham. We need to be providing concrete examples of what the options are and asking people to help us understand how their values translate into choices. So it's going to be tough. Equitable engagement is a priority for this, and continued to be a priority for this. And that background engagement data that we have from the last several years is going to be our starting point.
So how are neighborhoods going to be able to find out about this, and do they sign up? Who do they contact if they want to be a part of this process?
Great question. So we're just starting all of this work, so figuring it out. But there's 2 things that can be helpful that we can make sure to send as part of the follow-up email. One of those is there's an email address that you can use, newudo@durhamnc.gov. That goes to a few different staff members. It's a place we just wanted people to be able to start asking questions as they come up. So that is one thing. And then we've also created a placeholder page on the Engage Durham website. So engagedurham.com/new UDO. We'll share that link as well. It has a little bit of information about the stuff we're fixing to get ready with right now. And that's where we're going to post, as there is information about the project, about engagement, all of that. We want people to bookmark that page, and then we'll continue to use communication methods that we've been using on the comprehensive plan as well. It's new UDO, and we'll send the link because I can't remember if there's a underscore or anything like that. But I think it's just engagedurham.com/new UDO. Great questions.
Hi. When you talk about code, you're not talking about computer code, are you?
No. So code equals regulations in this. Yeah. So all of the rules that tell people who want to build something in our community what they have to comply with in order to get it approved.
So that studio code, when you Google it, it's all about computer code.
Oh, Code Studio is the name of the consultant. So maybe Code Studio and Planning, something like that. We can also try and see if we can pull that website up and share it with y'all. Sure. I think that we might be needing to transition. These are all fantastic questions. Thanks for sharing them with us. But we're going to be taking
I just want, if you could pull up the last slide just for the soils. Yeah, so this is an issue that has come up with respect to parks and recreation and the concern about there being lead in some of the parks. So we just want to make sure that people had access to this website. You can learn more about the soil property testing that's happening, and information about how to get tested if necessary. So that's one thing that the city has been focusing on.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everybody. We're going to take a little break here and reconvene, let's say about 6:20, I think is what the agenda says. We're really excited to have Evian and Angel be talking about the Reimagining the Durham Freeway. So thanks, everyone. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to have Evian and Angel introduce themselves. We're really excited to have them here talking about the project Reimagining the Durham Freeway. So we're going to hand it off.
Thanks, Carl. Good evening. I'm Evian Patterson, Assistant Transportation Director in the City of Durham. I'm very excited and find this an honor and privilege to be here to talk about our project, especially with what Lisa was talking about earlier and everyone was covering, because we are working towards Durham doing the work and putting our money where our mouths are, especially when it comes to engagement. Before I hand it over to Angel to introduce herself, I do want to recognize our County Commissioner and Chair, Brenda Howerton, in the back there, and thank her for being here tonight too. Angel.
I'll practice using this.
Okay, there you go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angel Isette Dozier, and I obviously remember you all from a few weeks ago for the first session, so it's really an honor to be back. I am the founder of Be Connected Durham and Beyond, so our work is to do the things that connect everything to itself in order for it to function as a system. And so we are the consultants for the Durham Freeway study, along with Idealisms. I heard Lisa mention Ideal Ortiz's name earlier. We are the partners in consulting for the Durham Freeway study in order to ensure the equitable engagement process. And just to add one more thing, because this has come up, and thank you so much for mentioning it, Lisa. Ideal and I have been talking about the fact in the process to creating what we now know as the Equitable Engagement Blueprint. So I'll be happy to answer, I believe it was your question, and some other questions just with regard to how does something like this work?
So the NC 147 study, which we call Reimagine Durham Freeway, is a study that has been funded by the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, and is a feasibility study to look at the impacts of the Durham Freeway really on Durham and the residents and this historic harm to black community, the black community here, namely Hayti and others that you saw on the map earlier. But it's an opportunity for us to develop a community-led vision for what possibilities could be for this large freeway. It is a NC, North Carolina State DOT-owned highway. It was built in the 1970s as part of the urban renewal projects and came right through Hayti, and really just disconnected the communities that relied on Hayti. If you are black and brown in this town, my fathers and my ancestors remember going to Pettigrew Street, and that was where you went to get your haircut and the entertainment. There's Biltmore Hotel, Regal Theater. This was really the heart of black community and black economic development in Durham. And there was actually a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois who speaks of Hayti and specifically Pettigrew as a burgeoning and thriving black middle class. And it really is inherent to our history here in Durham, but was totally decimated during the construction of the highway. So we put forth the proposal in for the MPO to do this feasibility study. But we wanted to make sure that we were coming at this with moving at the speed of trust and really focusing on making sure we're not doing the same things that were done in the past, where you have engineers and planners who come to communities with an idea and say, here, sign on to it, and not know what the impacts would be. But really work with the community to think through some of the ideas and concepts that come from the country where these types of projects have occurred as well. But also provide a space to heal and really take time for that healing. And it's important for us to do that as a city, not only just for the black and brown communities who exist in the history there, but all of us have an opportunity to heal and really come together and think of a new future for the highway. The study will look at things like, of course, as I said, the impacts, but also look at what are the possibilities. Could you create a boulevard? Could you cap and cut it? Could you create more green space? Really, what can we do to reconnect the community that was disconnected by the highway? These are concepts, as I mentioned, that is occurring right now in the U.S. There's the Congress for New Urbanism, who really focused on every city in America has a black community that has been affected by a highway that has brought through as part of urban renewal and to address urban blight in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And those communities are now given an opportunity to do this type of visioning. And some of the examples that we've seen are like in New Orleans, where there's Claiborne Avenue, and they're looking at how to create more economic opportunities from the redevelopment of the highway and capping some of the locations. or Reconnect Rondo in Minneapolis, which community group came together to build a land bridge, or doing a visioning right now to construct a land bridge over their highway to reconnect community and really focus on the arts and culture of the community. One of the things that the Transportation Department wanted to do was make sure we're not doing things like we've done in the past, like I said, with our planning projects, hiring a professional firm to come in and do the technical analysis, and as part of that technical analysis has this public outreach task. That usually is a large learning curve for these firms that are not rooted in this community, and they have to take time to go and touch and find people to engage with, but usually miss the mark in the past. Really missing the mark with things like only doing surveys at a touch point, and then that survey doesn't really tell the real experience, and it shows up as data, but only to really inform their decisions, what they were already making decisions on before. Just something to include. So what we wanted to do is change the way you engage with communities and really flip it on its head and acknowledge and recognize that we have community leaders and community groups who are doing this work right now, of engaging with their community, with the constituents, especially in these underserved and underrepresented communities, to lend voice and to advocate for things that they want to see in their community, but utilizing our community leaders to help us with the engagement. And this is born out of some other experience we had with a previous project, the Better Bus Project, where we engaged with and partnered with neighborhood improvement services to fund community partners, their community partners program, and hold space for us to meet communities where they're at, to bring our project ideas, to gather feedback, to give an opportunity for community members to be at the decision-making table to see how the sausage was made. And it's something when I came in, that was one of my first projects. And we were successful in that. And how I'm successful is because I'm sitting next to one of our community partners from that program. We said our success from really, from my perspective, building the capacity of community groups to advocate for what they need and what they want, but also can do the engagement work better than some of these firms can do it. So we looked for opportunity to contract with a community partner to really invest by creating business opportunity for community partners, local community partners, to do this engagement work. And so for this project, separate from how we did in the past, we have two approaches to the project. Is hiring a technical firm to do the analysis, your normal engineering firm, and then hiring a local community partner. And so through an RFP process, we heard there are other community partners out here doing this work too, and presented some great proposals to us. But we selected Ideal Ortiz and Be Connected Durham with Angel Dozer here, say her full name. Because of their deep connection and their ear to the ground in the community, and they've alluded to the work they've done with the Equitable Engagement Blueprint, but I've been at the table where Angel is guiding how we do these listening programs, projects, really lending voice to how we communicate with our public, and that we have to be intentional with what we say, and in order to get that feedback, in order to make sure that the folks who are going to come to the table are going to see the work, and are going to know that they're part of the engagement and part of the decision-making process. we are at this stage right now. I'm going to hand it over to Angel to talk about their work, but we're really excited about it, and we're really excited about the model and continuing the work that the planning department has been doing with engagement ambassadors, what we've been doing with the Better Bus Project, and making this part of our daily work. And Angel was telling me, which you can speak about at a commission meeting, where now residents are asking, have you done your engagement, and expecting it. And so we hope that we can be a model for our partners in the government, but also for the nation. So let me hand over to Angel.
Okay, thank you. So first I want to talk a little bit about the equitable engagement process, because I think this is important for you all as planners, because there's so many aspects of planning. Oftentimes we hear about the traditional things, land use, we hear about public art projects, and we hear about soil and water accountability, but we don't necessarily hear about community engagement, well, maybe just up until maybe a few years ago. So 2016, 2017, we had learned of the Durham Beltline Project, which is how this process got started. And so I've been a part of this work for a while, but I've come in and out of it because it's something that had to happen from a grassroots perspective originally. So I make that point to say grassroots efforts are always the most effective way. So if you feel like you are creating a new way to be a planner or to do community engagement, and you know that this is something that just must be done, please do it. All of this work is interconnected, and so I just wanted to set everything up with that. If you have a burning desire to do community engagement and to be effective in a field that you already have expertise in or interest in, think about being able to create an angle that somebody else might be able to understand in the near future. So we saw an issue with the Durham Beltline Project. We thought that the city of Durham would repeat history with regard to what happened to the Hayti community. And one of the things, as Evan mentioned, the Hayti community and the Durham Freeway, and how that actually dismantled a thriving community and called it blighted. And there are a lot of very, 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 oh my goodness, well-intentioned things that happen to make it appear to be that way. And what I love about the City of Durham Planning Department is they've been very transparent about that. They've acknowledged it in the Durham Comprehensive Plan. They are constantly acknowledging these things in the City of Durham, and I think that's what makes a community more whole. It makes us feel connected. We can start to trust each other, and that points to the healing that Evian was talking about. So we said, we can't allow history to be repeated. There has to be some kind of equitable engagement process so that people know that there might be somebody popping up in the front of their yard about to drill a hole or ditch or something to put up this public whatever it is, some infrastructure that they were not made aware of. And we know that happens a lot in historically black communities. So we organized and we got some people together, 400 people as a matter of fact, over at Shepherd Missionary Church in East Durham. And we brought down Nathaniel Smith, who was the CEO or executive director of the Atlanta Beltline Project, which is what that project was being patterned after. And he told us was very transparent about the major problems and how that project, because it was full of art and cultural relevance, how that project actually was used by the city of Atlanta to gentrify the old Fourth Ward in Atlanta. And it's true. There used to be complete boarded up houses in that area, and now it's hard to get in there. It's hard to get a home there or to rent there. So we walk that process through City Council, the testimonials with the people who gathered at Shepherd, and we work with Steve Schewel and a lot of City of Durham officials to say we need to have some kind of agreement. If these are going to be the developers that come into the City of Durham to do this work, we have to have some kind of engagement so that people who are normally unheard get the opportunity to make a decision about what's going to happen to them rather than that thing happen to them. And I think it's really important to remember this when you're thinking about a career in planning, especially outside of, the City of Durham department or some kind of municipal department, because you have more power than you think. You have a lot more power than you think. And so, we actually, we did a few things. So there were some artistic expressions, some singing took place at City Council meetings, just so y'all know. Some chanting and some other demonstrations to help, make our message known in a variety of ways. And so, the long and short of that is Steve Schewel said, yeah, they're right. I'm heavily invested into this project personally, yada, yada, yada. But they're right. There does need to be an equitable engagement process. And so we were able to kind of say, hey, here's an outline. Here's some words. Here's some guidance. We've actually already been working on that. That's why we organized people to say, can we do this? So that's about equitable engagement and kind of the background. Now I'm going to skip to the freeway study because this work is interconnected, as I said earlier, and it's also emerging. So if you do one thing and you do that one thing well, small as all, then you have something, a strong foundation to build upon. And so we're talking about going from, organizing and singing at City Council meetings to get a process in place to having the planning department, transportation, and neighborhood improvement services picking up this and saying, yo, we have to be a part of this. There were only 5 cities in the whole country, y'all, who were even thinking about an equitable engagement type of plan. Evian mentioned New Orleans. That was one. In Minneapolis was another. Some stirrings in Kansas City, Missouri, and I made a list. Some places in Portland were stirring, Oakland, California, and of course, D.C. was leading the charge because, see, D.C. can kind of do whatever they want to do because it's not really a state. So to know that these were the kind of groups of people who were thinking about, like, we have to do this thing for real, has to be authentic engagement. We got to go all the way down to the root, and it's actually okay to do that because that's where the people who have been left behind are. They're not your respectable black, brown, indigenous person. They are the people who, might walk up to you wearing a tattered suit. They might be the people who are walking up to you in just a jogging suit and some sneakers. But because they're also black, brown, indigenous, or a person of color, and they don't necessarily have on this suit that might make you feel safe, because we get conditioned in that way, then you might not take them seriously. And this is the one small fractal that builds into a lot of fractals that make up a system, and that's eventually why you have certain people who are generally unheard and other people who are. So what we're trying to do with this work is to change the way that cycle runs. And we go all the way down to the root, the person with the lived experience, the person who is probably trying to figure out whether or not they're going to pay their light bill or put a little bit on the light bill right here, and I'll put a little bit over on the phone bill right here. These are people who create ways to survive every day off of little to nothing. Who would not want to have advice from that kind of creative? And that is what's really powerful about planning. You can be connected to where the real healing is, where the real work is, because it's right there at the surface where the harm is. The harm is, it's at the surface. And so your experts are the people with the lived experience. And so that is where the structure for our engagement work as it relates to the freeway study has evolved to. So we have actually 4 tiers of engagement that we are developing and that we've been in practice for the last 3 years. And this is what you'll be hearing about, because there'll be opportunities for you all to be involved, because guess what? Y'all are my neighbors now. That's the way we want to be able to see each other. Everybody, even the unhoused person who knocked on my door 3 times asking me for $1 yesterday, is still my neighbor. And so every now and then I might be able to ask her, hey, how did you get here? What do you think about this thing or that thing? And normally, y'all, I come and represent those answers because they are brilliant answers. We're talking about people who are not in the same privileged positions that I might be able to enjoy, and that's also what drives me. So here's the engagement structure. We are forming a public engagement committee. We call that PEC, wherein we work with community partners or neighborhood organizations, nonprofits, our ward representatives, our PAC representatives, to advise and hold us accountable, including us, the creators of this process, but to hold us accountable and to make sure that we are doing things differently. That is one of the things that Evian and the Department of Transportation has said over and over and over. We are trying to do things differently. We are going to do those things differently, even if it means we have to take a little bit longer, because we want to do this thing right this time. Okay, so the Public Engagement Committee, these are people who will be stipend to advise with regard to this community engagement process, who will work with the city and the technical engineers and technical professionals, technical team. I'm getting the words all interchangeably mixed up here. But this is, you will be, these people, or you even, will be heavily involved in the process and ensuring that there is connection to the other tiers as well as to us and the city and any of the technical teams and professionals that are involved. Then we will have our institutional partners. So these will be partners like the Hayti Heritage Center, North Carolina Central, even Moorhead Bed and Breakfast. Chicken Hut was one of our original partners with our equitable engagement, Everybody Eats process. And even New Visions of Africa. If y'all know Brother Kasib, he is directly across from the bus station or the bus shelter that's between Lincoln Community Health Center and W.D. Hill. He's right there on the corner. He has been one of our advisors in the community. So people like him from businesses and organizations and institutions will be partners and will meet quarterly for that work. So for the first thing I said, Public Engagement Committee, we will meet monthly. For our institutional partners, we will meet quarterly. And then we are curating a few engagement events ourselves that span from jazz concerts to R&B, take me back reviews, to a variety of really cool things to invite people to say, this culture and this art it also belongs to you, and it's the thing that will connect us to each other so that we can actually exchange information and get that qualitative data and make sure that you're represented in the changes that we all want to see. So these engagement events will be used to invite people into the fold in ways that, are entertaining, but also help you to be involved in something that you probably want to be involved in. And your neighbors, particularly those who have been apathetic in the past because they've tried until they can't try anymore, and so they've gotten discouraged, and they might, say a cuss word or two when we show up canvassing or knocking on their door, which leads me to the next tier of engagement, and that is the existing community partnerships that we have with people who are community ambassadors, and what we have at Be Connected Durham called the Fayetteville Street Corridor Fellows Project. We have urban planning and community development fellows who actually work and canvas out in the community. Their whole job is to build relationships with our neighbors and to say, hey, Miss Roberta, did you hear about this Better Bus Project survey? Do you think it's okay for me to talk to you about it? And finally, after a few times of, having the door shut on us by Miss Roberta, finally she's like, yeah, come on in here. Let me answer these questions so y'all can make sure that my voice is heard. So Miss Roberta loved the idea of being represented. Eventually, when she understood that we were going to keep coming back and knocking on the door, Miss Roberta, we're not trying to bother you, but just want to know if you're okay and you got the COVID supplies you need, that kind of thing. So our community ambassadors are also stipend. They go out. Obviously, we're talking about equity and equitable engagement, so we also want to make sure that the people who are doing this labor are being compensated in some way, and that compensation evolves as well, because this is really labor. And oftentimes, your neighbors are doing a lot of work that could be considered volunteer work, but also can be considered a part-time job or even a full-time job, doing neighborhood watches and organizing the community. And these are the people that we want to be able to work with and also make sure that they are receiving some kind of compensation for work that they're already doing. But we just want to be intentional about partnering with them, because with them come the networks that they are attached to, maybe their whole neighborhood, and those things are really important, because we need everybody who's willing to contribute to this data, especially those who are historically marginalized. I'll pause there because I know I talked quite a bit.
Well, I think the organizers wanted us to make this more of a discussion, so we gave the introduction here and told you about the project. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
So the main reason I came to this class was to see how the city was going to make affordable living better, and I'm a little disappointed because I see that they're really not, and I feel that that's the new way of getting rid of the people that they don't want, in a way, because I feel that, there's no middle class houses being made. So at the end of the day, the only ones that are going to be able to stay in Durham are going to be your higher class, or those who can afford to stay in Durham. So I still feel that it's a different way of gentrifying the community. I don't know if your plans are to change it, or ways of changing it, or if there's going to be an open conversation on how it could be changed in a way.
Yeah, one of the things that Angel was speaking about is the interconnectedness of other facets of life that's not just transportation. So, yeah, this is a pure transportation study, feasibility study, but there are other factors that we're going to hear from the community about affordable housing, about if you're creating, we don't want to create another, the infrastructure that exasperates and excels gentrification and pushes more people out. So why not have the community work with us to come up with the economic development plan, come up with affordable housing plans, and help influence some of those discussions as they come along as well. In addition to our transportation plan, I know the UDO rewrite is occurring as well, so we're going to work together. So we're capturing your comments and capturing the comments from the community members that we're meeting, because this is about helping the community remain in place as much as we can and giving them an opportunity to have that input on the study.
I'll just add, I really love that question. I think it's really important to stay with that question and to keep asking the question. There's such a big need for housing organizers. It's one of the ways in which, if they're not organizers, like community-rooted people working on the housing crisis in conjunction with the city and saying, y'all need to do this, we're not taking no for an answer, here are models for, or really just being on diligent about ensuring that all these organizations or agencies within the city of Durham are accountable to this change. It'll just be a lot of lip service. So remember, again, you have you have so much power as a citizen and resident of Durham who has these questions, because those are the questions that are going to continue to keep us all honest and accountable. And with regard to the UDO and how something like this how your question will come across for me in terms of tackling the issue. For example, the Unified Development Ordinance is problematic for my neighborhood. I live in the historic Hayti community off of Fayetteville Street. And so a historic property that existed during Hayti in its heyday is a boarded up, kind of blighted eyesore in the community. And one of the reasons why no one can develop that area just yet, or that particular building and the space around it, is because there are a minimum requirement of parking spaces that a business has to have in order to be a business. And because that land and that parking lot in particular is leased or something that's really interesting, that benefits another area that's being redeveloped, people can't access or count those parking spaces, those minimum parking spaces. And so when we're aware of things like that, which we might only be aware of in our community, and we don't realize, oh, wait a minute, this is an injustice. The UDO dictates this, and the UDO really needs to be changed, because in effect, it's not equitable if people in a historically black community and also a blighted community are expected to open a business in this area, but the UDO pretty much says that you're not going to be able to because you don't have these minimum parking spaces. These are examples of things that we do have to be able to hear about and to advocate for, because if you're on the other side, you don't necessarily know that problem exists. That's why lived experiences are so important, and that we are able to bring those lived experiences to the table. So please do keep it coming with the housing questions and the housing accountability.
So I just wanted to maybe offer you some hope in that the way I see this and how it connects to housing. I come from an area where if they wanted to redevelop like city land, right, and move the people who are poorer, right, out. They would move them out to an area where there is no public transportation. What that means is that they can't get a job because they have no way to get there, right? So in partnering with the transportation group and helping them to understand how to develop that part, help them to keep transportation with people who can't afford to move out of the city, in the city, so that those people can continue to get to work, but also work with, you know, some of the housing sessions we had where we were talking about rents and talking about, you know, developing land and doing multi-housing and all that kind of stuff. Work with them to make sure that those multi-housing projects also include people who are, I don't want to say poorer, but that's the only word that comes to my mind. Low income, there you go. Thank you so much. That was the first word that came to my mind. But yeah, so work with them, and as they're saying, it's all interconnected. It really is, and so we want to keep people, you know, if there was someone here talking about education, we want to work with them on that piece as well. We want to work to keep people in their homes where they are in the city. We want to make sure they have ways to get to work. We want to make sure that they have, you know, food, grocery stores and things like that. So it's all connected, so don't give up hope and just try and find a way where you can actually just, you know, do your part, right? You don't have to do it all, just do your part. So, yeah. Thank you.
While you're walking over there, I just remembered that I needed to answer the federal question you had. The bipartisan infrastructure law came into effect, I guess now 2 years ago now. 2 years ago, and time is flying. And part of that funding included the Reconnecting Communities funding that would fund studies and construction projects for these types of studies that we're doing with NC 147. We did not apply the last round because we knew we couldn't come with an idea without checking with the community first. And so we set that round out, got our funding in place for the feasibility study, got our partners in place so that we can start the conversation and start the process to then be able to put an application in for additional planning work. This year we did apply for it. Just about 2 months ago we provided an application that would help us continue the study beyond what we know we're going to need more time, because there's going to take time for the engagement piece to continue the conversation and not do what has been done in the past, like when you come up with an idea, then we have to wait and tell the community we got to get some more money. So we're asking the government, federal government, to fund the NC 147 study, which we call Phase 2 or Phase 1B, that will look at some of those additional considerations. Okay.
Tammy, I got you. You can text me. I got you. Are y'all involved in the Fayetteville Street Corridor project as well? It seems like it would be connected. If you are, could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, we are involved. Now, I will say that the work that's being done on Fayetteville Street with regard to this project, which we don't quite know what the project is. Our organization, Be Connected Durham, has the Fayetteville Street Corridor Fellows Project, who wrote the original plan, community engagement and community development plan to implement an equitable engagement implementation series. And so our idea was to do it by using the concept of Third Friday, which is already here. You know, it's already a Durham concept. It was created by 3 artists who were like, we want to show our work. And they were able to get support. Eventually, what emerged into what we know as Third Friday Downtown and in the Golden Belt community with regard to also having it funded and supported by Downtown Durham Inc. and the Visitors Bureau, because it is. This is a part of, tourism. This is a part of the story of the city of Durham. And through our community engagement process, one of the things we do is we talk to people. So we ask, knock on doors, and hey, why don't you fill out the census? And one person told us, about the bus system, based on what you were talking about in terms of, the bus doesn't come on time, there's no signage, there's no this or that. So we were able to, influence the Better Bus Project survey. But this person also said, well, I go to Third Friday Downtown, I want to be involved in the arts, yada, 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 and I just don't ever feel comfortable. It's never, I ask people questions about how to be involved in this or that, and it just doesn't feel like it's for me. And I said, well, what if we had, if we brought Third Friday to you? There's nothing like that in the Hayti community, and there should be. I mean, this was a vibrant business and cultural mecca, and that process led to this idea of implementing arts ecosystems up and down Fayetteville Street at 5 sites between 2020 and 2030. So we're in 2023, year 3 of that process with Hayti Heritage Center, and now in a leisure agreement with W.D. Hill. And so I'm trying to answer this question and be really nice, just so y'all know, because I don't want to be nice right now, but I'll be nice. So that part of the process, actually, because we work with neighborhood improvement services and transportation to really present not just a community engagement project. We knew, because we were originators of the first process in each part of the process, we knew that we were going to be scaling the work that we've already done into a community development plan. That was the plan altogether, but you have to start small as all. And so we were like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to answer this person's question by actually creating the Third Friday Hayti initiative. And in that process, we're going to have planning and transportation and the budget, participatory budget people, and the COVID clinics, and all these people coming to what we have said is an art exhibit. Here's a concert. Here is, we built a skate rink out in the parking lot at Hayti to attract people. And now we want you to come here and answer this question or answer this survey. We don't necessarily like the surveys, but there's another way to do it. And that's how we've been able to collect our data and also get these high numbers for our Third Friday events. So the answer to the question, the short answer is yes, we are very much involved. The current project that you see as the Hayti Community Healing Plan, as it relates to these community development corporations claiming to have, built the work. The work is actually the Third Friday project for Hayti scaled up to the community development and capital development level. It's the same project. It's just scaled up. So yes, we are very involved.
I'll just say we're all involved in this, and everybody keep asking that question. There are lots of ideas. Remember where the roots are at, and we'll build from that. That's why I think, that's a question you should always ask. If you're like, what's up with that project, and are you doing it? Yes, and get that answer.
I just have a question to kind of, in my mind, kind of pull things together. So we have the community engagement ambassadors, and I guess my overall question is, where are their gaps? Like, where can we kind of jump in and say, you know what, there's a need here, let me go to that community, those 4 blocks or whatever it is. How do we figure out where the gaps are so that either we or friends or relatives or what have you can fill in the gaps to get as many people as we can engaged, involved, speaking out, whatever.
I love that question. I know I've been a little dramatic up here, but y'all, you gotta. That's such a great question. I'm gonna say number one, we need you all for that, because again, speaking to the power that each of us has as residents, or people who love Durham, or people who went to college in Durham, or whatever your Durham relationship is. That is a form of wealth, and is absolutely valuable, your perspective. So one of the things that we have found in this process, number one, was the arts connection for people who, who live in McDougall Terrace. This is actually where we were getting this information from there and Cornwallis Homes in 2020. So these were our subjects, and they were, we definitely made sure they were compensated because their perspective was also a gap. People don't go to people who live in affordable housing complexes, which to us in the planning world, to y'all in the planning world, a zero-car household community, because these are people who are more likely to have to rely on the bus system, but they may not be able to because of, whatever the system is like. And that is a duty and a responsibility of the city and county where a person resides, or the town where people reside, is to have public transportation that's actually effective. So we also found that by doing. I will admit, I'm a bus rider, y'all. I lived in Raleigh for about 6 months. I don't like to admit that part, but I did. And I took the DRX to Duke University, which is where I was working at the time. I literally could get from Raleigh to Durham in 20 minutes. And I was on the bus with all kinds of medical doctors and nurse practitioners and all kinds of people who were also going to Duke. And you can go around. So when I go to the airport or whatever, I take the bus as much as I can. So I will say that. But we had to, because I do take the bus and I've gotten lost many times, and I'm really good about my directions here in Durham. I know Durham like the back of my hand, y'all. I am not kidding. But on the bus, I got lost each time. And I realized, y'all, we're going to have to get on this bus so we can actually see what people are experiencing. And so that's how we found more transit riders. Like Mark Lee, who works at Hayti Heritage Center, he rides the bus everywhere he goes. And so we got Mark to help us do a tour. This is what the area is like. Let's do this bus tour so we can understand how do we need to be able to navigate these bus routes. How do we get around Durham to the places we want to go and still, get there, by midnight. Because sometimes it might take you a few hours to get to where you're going to, because people don't ride because they don't trust it. And nowadays, you don't have to, because the rule of the day and the popular thing of the day, the thing that makes you somebody, is if you own a car. And if you own a really nice car, then you are really somebody, right? But, everywhere I've been, I have traveled around the world. My favorite thing in the world to do is to ride public transportation, because I can see everything. I don't have to be responsible. I don't have to be in charge. I don't have to feel stress and anxiety from traffic. I can just sit back, read a book, listen to some music, and just kind of watch, what's going on. And that's my education of Durham, is being able to observe it. So I love that question. I'm long-winded, so I really liked answering that one.
I just want to answer real quick. Sorry. Some of the gaps. So one of the things that we have to be responsible as a government is letting our public know that there are certain tools that are available to you and how you access our services. One of the stories I always tell about a community partner, I'll leave their name out of it, but they were one of our community partners who our Better Bus project was not impacting their area, but they were still a community partner. They still came to the meetings. They still had a seat at the table, could give their feedback, watch Angel and her group talk about what they want to see on Fayetteville Street. And they took that model and created their own matrix. And they walked through their neighborhood, listed out all of their things that they'd like to see fixed, and they called the government in for a meeting, and they wasn't to like get on the government and put them on blast, but they asked, what are some realistic timelines that you can give us to address these priorities? And they put it in low, medium, and high ranges. So that model is a great range for neighborhoods to say, okay, I'm going to walk and do these walk audits. Angel's been part of those, seeing what these issues, what the lived experience, putting that on paper and saying to the government, we have met. We're going to hold you accountable with these this work, and we're responsible for telling you how we can get to it. We can say, well, high means it involves more funding. We have to go through a lot of the statutory and ordinance revisions, or medium would be what we can do in 1 to 2 years. But you know what's most powerful, and this Angel knows this, what are some of those low-hanging fruit, the low stuff? Like picking up trash at a bus stop, those things like that. Those are tools that are available to residents, and we have to do a better job of letting them know. But I'm glad that you have this class, because you can go out and tell them, because it's each one teach one on this, like we learned from that community partner, and it's something that we expect and anticipate, and we're not just going to react to it, always be reactive, but it helps us be more proactive and understand what are the particular needs in the community.
Angel, I have a question around equitable engagement in terms of, do you have any recommendations for, one, I guess, for best practices for us as community members, and then two, I guess, any tools or techniques that you use while you're holding these sessions? I like the idea of filling the gaps. I'm a gap filler myself because I work in the real estate space. However, that sometimes can be misinterpreted, right, as taking advantage of. And I've been in a number of settings where the public has had the opportunity to engage, and I guess, what are some tools that you use to kind of get to the root cause of what people want, and not their convenient concern, not their concern around what's happening as long as it's not happening in my backyard, what's being done for affordable housing in areas that are inherently affordable versus throughout the community as a whole. So do you have any insights on that?
Yes, and I thank you for asking this question too. It's really good, and it feels interconnected. So one of the things we did early on, part of our project, was to create a directory, right, with the people that we connected to and engaged with. And we wrote out a list of places that we needed to be and to include as a part of the directory, because this is culturally competent and culturally relevant for the people whose voices are not represented most of the time. And so when you hear about people talking about meeting up at the barbershop and going to the beauty salons and actually connecting with the barbers, the owners, the people who own the land, finding out, oh, do you own this? Oh, this is like incredible. There's so many of you who exist and people don't know this. What would you want the city of Durham to know? So going to talking to barbershops, talking to people at barbershops, because that's an exchange, a place of exchange, always has been, in the way that the grocery stores, the family-owned grocery stores here in Durham used to be. The barbershops and beauty salons still have that exchange of information, kind of a platform, easy, therapeutic platform. Y'all know I go out to the artsy and the cultural things, and I'm everywhere from like Blue Note Grill for Brett's open mic on Wednesday nights. Believe me, I'm at work when I'm out there, but I'm gonna shake a leg. So it really is an effective tool. I'm not even kidding. to go to Brett's open mic, to go to Hey Thai Kitchen on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights. They have open mic, and it's like a whole production, y'all. This is where the people are. And so for you being in the real estate profession, and I was talking to Kim about this earlier, you have this really incredible opening. And I can understand why you would see, oh, well, people think you're taking advantage. But, you know, like, to your point, Kim, when you were talking about, like, I really had this desire to do community engagement and community development, and your expertise really is a part that contributes to the wealth of our community with this information, because information is wealth, right? So thinking about that, if you, even your everyday ordinary people, if it's somebody that you work with, let's say you make, I don't know what kind of things a real estate professional would do right offhand, but let me just use a delivery person, for example. If a delivery person, you know, kept coming to your businesses and the rest of these other 4 businesses in the area every day, you know this person's face, even if you never asked their name. That's the person right there to build with, because they're going to all 4 of those businesses, and it's a way that has become a best practice, and you know, with regard to understanding the things that we don't necessarily see. So that would be some insight that I would provide, and also a tool is the most unlikely people that I think that I wouldn't maybe normally talk to about, you know, how's the weather is. Hey, what do you think about this bus system over here? You know, and you can't just do that with anybody, but I have actually learned to make it a practice to do that with just about anybody that I come across in the neighborhood, and that's actually what's given us that qualitative data that helps us to figure out, okay, well, this is a story, and this is a very common story. That's how we know about the technology issues, the bus issues, all kinds of issues in the Fayetteville Street corridor.
I thought I had one, but now I don't think I do.
Did you say something about root cause? You want to get... Okay.
Well, I did, because I feel like there is this, you can't always keep balance. So from like a equitable engagement standpoint, there's the give and take of it. We want affordable housing. We don't want any more development. We don't want our taxes raised. So how else do you increase the economy within the city? There's a give and take that comes with that. And then when we're in these public forums, I'm all for environmental justice, and then I feel like sometimes those things get conveniently weaponized to prevent things that help promote the growth of the city. So how do you navigate those conversations? Because then all of a sudden it becomes the parking, it becomes the tree canopy. Pick one. You know, they've all been leveraged in some ways, and it's not so much of, I think, a right or wrong. I think it's more of where is the greater impact. With that being said, I'm always at the intersection of community and business. So let's just take, for example, affordable housing, right? I work with some small developers, and so I like how at the beginning you guys use like the capital P and the lowercase p. I feel like there's a lowercase d developer and a capital D developer. They're not all big corporations. But to that end, I want you to remember that the developer is the person to my left and the person to my right. Put an addition on your house and you're a developer, right? But if this person is someone that's homegrown from the community, then it kind of becomes, okay, why do you want me to only build affordable? Why don't I get the same opportunity at the profits as someone else? I can put a house on the market tomorrow for $200,000. But if we end up in multiple offers, are you gonna leave all the money above the $200,000 on the table? You see what I'm saying? Those are very personal choices. And these are things that help families with their legacy and move forward. So yes, you have density bonuses and certain things of that nature, but the cost does not always factor out the same for the smaller developer. And what if the neighbor doesn't want 2-story houses in a home in a neighborhood that's traditionally 1-story? You know what I'm saying? So I'm always kind of at that intersection of, one, I can do my part to speak with the developers that I work with about, hey, if we go in here, how can we incorporate into the design unique elements that are already in the community without something that looks so different? You know, I can do my engagement from that perspective. But at the end of the day, they may override my decision and my contribution in that aspect. But I just feel like it's a tough landscape, and yes, there are real concerns around some environmental things and other concerns that we have about infrastructure with the city. And however, I don't like them conveniently weaponized to prevent the growth and things that need to happen, because what you're talking about is urban sprawl. Essentially, when people get priced out of an area, there's a lack of affordability, and then there's no public transit for them to get back in the area. With that being said, especially being a minority in the community, when we approve things, there becomes this challenge of we can't wait until everybody's ready to approve something. And however, I don't know if I really like how it feels when something gets approved and my community can't take advantage of it at the same scale and pace as everybody else. So it's the intersection of all the things.
I will say that's some insight right there to keep providing to us, Precious. Thank you for that. Wow. Yeah. It speaks to what Evian was saying about healing, the need for it. So with regard to the balance part,
I know, right?
No, really. I mean, because that is actually that's the work. To be able to provide that unique of a perspective. This is what we get from talking to the neighbors who are not normally marketed to or appealed to. And it is an environmental justice issue, believe it or not. All of it is, because where do people get pushed to? One of our neighbors who lived in Cornwallis Homes at that time had a utility thing. We still don't even know what it is. Installed right in front of their doorstep at Cornwallis Homes. And I'm gonna tell y'all a little quick story about like me and the way that I thought at the time, which was very inappropriate. So I'm telling on myself. When she told me about this, I was like, oh, well, they are, doing all these murals on the traffic signals. Maybe we can get, some art put on it. That is what my response was to her when she said, this thing is in the front of my yard and I don't know what it is. My response was, let's put some public, let's paint it. Let's make it pretty. And I literally caught myself after I said that, and I was like, oh my God. This is how I feel when I raise an issue about something that's really important and seems really small, but nobody is going to do anything about it, and they're going to use all the buzzwords to respond to effectively dismiss me. And I turned around and did that to my own Fayetteville Street corridor fellow. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh my God, that's why we have to do equitable work. It's about self-assessment, and that's that healing work. Because I needed to really check myself on that. And then I was like, you know what? I am so sorry I didn't hear you. Let's go figure out what this thing is. And what we were able to do was at least help the person, get whatever support they needed to move to a new home. But just a block away is a hazard waste field. And these are normally in communities where a Cornwallis Homes would be or a McDougall Terrace would be.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for being in conversation with us tonight, Angel and Evian. We really appreciate your time. I imagine there are more questions, but I think one of the great things from Planning Academy is we have relationships now. You have faces you can put to our names, especially Angel, Evian, and then those of us that have showed up to Planning Academy, all the great staff that have been supportive. We appreciate y'all. Feel free to reach out to us. We're here to build these relationships. That was one of our primary goals actually in this. A couple of things. So this is the last session somehow already. I don't know how that happened. Chris, do you want to pull up the, oh, thank you. We will be emailing you a survey. I know we just got done saying surveys we don't want to do them all the time. We might have survey fatigue. If you want to, oh, Chris wants me to stand here. If you don't want to do the survey, that's fine. If you just want to record something on your video and send it to me or send it to Amber, we're fine with that too. We'd love to hear from you, what your experience was like, maybe one thing you learned, and then one thing you wish you would have learned that you didn't. Next thing, the final ceremony, we moved. We were actually, found out we could not be in City Hall on a Saturday, which is fine. So if you are able to attend, we'll have some light refreshments. It's going to be from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on December 4th at City Hall. We'll do a tour. We'll show you where the Development Services Center is, City Manager's office. Probably can't go in there. And we will also, the new council and mayor will be sworn in that night. So I know some of you will be there anyway. So you can use it as an opportunity to meet some of your elected officials, say hi. So if you can't make it, that's okay, but we'd love to see you if you can. If you can't make it, let us know and we will make sure we get you your certificate. You can put it on your wall, frame it, whatever you like to Instagram if that's what people do. And the last thing is we had a really good question, and it came up several times, about traffic impact analysis. How is it calculated? What does it mean? And traffic in general is something that comes up at every public hearing, especially, sounds like you know that and you've been watching. So we're actually going to schedule a follow-up session. We'll do it virtually. We'll record it. Just 1 hour in kind of basic terms. What is a traffic impact analysis? How does it work? What does it measure? And we will record that. We'll invite y'all. And then if you're unable to attend, we'll share with you. With that, I don't have anything else to say other than thank y'all again for being here. And thanks all for being great and engaged participants. And excited to start working with you as small P and large P planners.